Hi, welcome to the Muslim Street, everyone. This is Hina Lotus. We are back after, I believe, 6 weeks. We've missed everyone, and we have an exciting show for everyone today. Wanted to introduce our guest. We have Imran Muneer. He needs no introduction from the Mad Mamluks. If you wanted to kind of introduce yourself for maybe, some stragglers who may not know you, we'd really appreciate it. We'd love to get to know you.
Yeah, absolutely. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me on, everyone. It was really nice to meet your whole team, and we had a very fascinating, fun discussion with Brother Imad yesterday from your team, and I hope your listeners go and check that out on our channel, the Mad Mamluks. but yeah, I'm one of the co-founders of the Mad Mamluks. We founded this show in 2016, I want to say. So it's been about like what is it, 9 year, 8 9 years or something, and yeah, we were probably the first podcast or one of the first podcasts out when this was all um, kind of growing. That whole podcast scene was growing. I remember one of the first podcasts I heard was uh, um, Muslim life hackers, and there were two girls out of Australia, and I was like, "Wow, these girls are so awesome! They're doing what I always wanted to do." And so I kind of did a whole lot of research for about 6 months, and uh, got a whole lot of equipment together. And being having a background in IT, I was able to set up a lot of the stuff together, and here we are, many years later. And yeah, more or less, kind of been at least the one achievement I would say at least was inspiring a lot of other podcasters to um, get going and moving in this direction. And many podcasts around the world have reached out to me for help and assistance, and was happy to oblige.
Yeah. And what inspired you to make the Mad Mamluks specifically? Meaning, like, when you created it, what was your vision? Like, what was like your message for everyone? What kind of guests were you wanting to bring on? And what would you say like separates your, podcast from the rest of like the Muslim podcast world? Because obviously, since you've
Yeah,
started, I know yours was the OG. There's been a
yeah,
multitude that have started. The Muslim Street, I think, is one of the newest kids on the block.
yeah. We're in a smaller segment of Muslim of the Muslim audience where we kind of target people who are regular Joes who take their religion seriously. It's an important part of their daily life, but they they're they're not super heavy religious, um, with the attire, and if even if they can be with the attire, but they just don't want to be hit in your face with religion all the time. So we kind of had like a regular Joe, an average Joe type of show with mixed with comedy and a lot of laughter actually, and talking about regular things. Kind of this is one of the descriptions that some people have given us is the Joe Rogan for Muslims, and it's kind of like that, but I think we're a bit more because of current events. I think we've zoned in on certain themes, like Gaza, much more than that stylish show that started off with. I think it's a duty on all of us to really um, hone in on an active genocide, and we have to use every bit of our resources to appeal and to get people involved and spread awareness around that. So, yeah, I grew up in a activist type background. When I was young, 14, 15, I was reading Karl Marx and um, communist movements and stuff like that because I didn't know anything about whether Islam had any kind of solution for this because I grew up during the Bosnian genocide, and I was like, wow, we're in a mess. I remember just going through our history books, and you would see the pages flipping through Muslim history whenever you got to the Muslim chapter, and you would see this magnificent, beautiful, the huge caliphates that came, and then all of a sudden you see this fractured Muslim. Oma, and then you're like, wait, how do we, you know, uh, we're not actually united because you'd hear about unity and brotherhood and all these kind of themes talked about in Sunday school and stuff, and you're like, that's not us. We're not united. And then you hear about when we were young, there were Bosnian Mujahideen who would be coming to our mosque. This was pre 9/11, by the way. So they would come and raise funds and stuff like that, and try to use that for humanitarian assistance in Bosnia. So that left a huge mark on me and a huge impression on my direction in life and where I wanted to go. Um, but as time went on, I kind of got disillusioned after the Iraq War and everything. I was just like, this is just, I can't do anything about this. I'm just going to deal with what's in front of me. And I just focused on teaching Sunday school. And I just taught that for a number of years and dealt with a lot of children. And I found a lot of peace with that. And I just kind of walked away from all that. And somewhere around 2015, 2016, when I started getting involved in politics again and just following up on what's going on, um, finding out this new medium of podcasting really allowed this activist side of me to come out again. And it's not just activism, but it's also just my curious nature. I'm curious about philosophy, history, um, just you name it. And I think it allowed me to explore those areas more. There's nothing more embarrassing than inviting a guest in economics. We had a economics professor named Jerry Hionis. He's a Muslim convert. I remember opening up my college books because I had them still stored in my bookshelf of economics and just reading through chapter by chapter as I prepared for the show. I was like, okay, make sure I get all the fundamentals down from Econ 101 and then making sure that we were trying to understand the effects of what COVID will do. And so these different areas, as you explore different areas with different guests, they allowed me to kind of become much more smarter, much more aware. And I feel like the podcast helped me more than anyone in becoming a well-rounded person and having a discussion with anyone who sits across me. So that's
You
kind
know,
of
it's
the
so
story.
oh, go on, I
No,
apologize.
no, no. That so and so the other co-hosts that join me are brothers who um, did their own thing. Sheikh Amer was a huge. Um, he's a very well learned scholar. He's a very self-deprecating person who is incredibly humble, but he studied with some of the greatest scholars in the world. Uh, Sheikh Hassan Dado, if anyone knows him among your listeners, he was one of his students in Mauritania. So uh, incredibly honored to have him as a not only a childhood student but a childhood friend, but he's sitting across me, helping me through navigate some of these more difficult discussions that are related to Islam. Mort is one of my co-hosts as well. He is an incredible expert in debating, apologetics, debating Christians and other faiths and philosophies around the world. So he's an expert in that. So yeah, we have a well-rounded group of individuals who kind of help us pick up after each other wherever we we may fall short. So
No, that's amazing. And what I was actually going to say is it's interesting that you brought up the Bosnian genocide. And the reason I say that is I remember I was in elementary school and my dad was obsessed with watching three things: the cooking channel, CNN, and Animal Planet. Those are like his three things. And he loved the Dallas Cowboys. So there's that too. But that being said, he would always, whenever he got home from work, he would obsessively watch CNN. And this was
yeah,
around the time that they were covering the Bosnian genocide. And I remember being super young, I just started school. And I remember watching it with him. And,
yeah,
obviously there was a multitude of children who are suffering. And you see like the footage from all that. And I remember crying and getting very depressed. I had all these like deep philosophical questions as a child.
Yeah.
And my mom, I remember she had yelled at my dad and was like, don't let Hina watch these things because, she's just a child. She doesn't know, X, Y, and Z. And my dad was like, no, Hina needs to watch this because this is the reality of the world. And I think
Yeah.
that is my first core memory of realizing that there's inequality in the world, that, there is, systems of oppression, that there is, are things such as privileges, that people
Yeah.
who look just like you or may share your religion suffer, all across the world. And I think that was actually the catalyst in how I got started. And then since
Yeah.
you brought up, your cast, I wanted to, for anyone just tuning into the Muslim Street, wanted to also give, a quick shout out to our, my co-host and the founder of the Muslim Street, Malik Aziz. Also Lance Curve, he does all of our production. He's in Ghana right now. We're always humbled to have him because he makes so many sacrifices to, help us put the show together. And then we actually, since the last episode, we have our newest correspondent. We have Imad Ul Turk, super amazing guy, super well accomplished. He was actually on an episode with the Mad Mamluks yesterday talking about Palestinian cryptocurrency and all of his accomplishments and, Palestinian history as a whole. I actually learned a lot. So, please check that out if you have a moment. But that being said, our episode today will be focusing predominantly on our future as Muslims and, what path are we going from here. We've kind of seen a lot of Muslims in the past align themselves with like certain political parties or even ideologies that usually just serve the West. And when anything serves the West, that means it's serving capitalism, imperialism, things that usually subjugate, minorities, especially Muslim communities. So that being said, I think it's kind of, especially after October 7th, it's made a lot of people in the Muslim community kind of open their eyes and realize, hey, like where do we identify ourselves in terms of social justice, in terms of politics? One thing that you brought up earlier, Imran, that is I'm very, very passionate about is the fact that until we unite as an ummah and realize that, there is unity, there needs to be brotherhood in order to move forward, to come up with solutions, we won't be able to progress. Because I think one thing that I've realized about the Muslim community is sometimes people view each other as like factions. Like, so for example, you'll see, the Middle Eastern community or the Arab community function for their self-interest, which doesn't, involve like the Black Muslim community. And then you also have the South Asian community. You have like the Afghani community. You have, all these different communities that are functioning out of their culture, out of their political ideology, outside of their race or nationality. And it's that divide that I think is causing a lot of the strife that we see in the global ummah. So I just kind of wanted to touch on, these topics and kind of discuss with you, the Mad Mamluks perspective as well as the Muslim Street perspective as to how, we can move forward. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, what would you say is the best path forward for Muslims?
Yeah. So going back to kind of the origin story, when we first started off the Medmund Lukes, we were thinking about the name. the We want to signify history, and we want to make a connection to historical um, um, inspiration, inspire ourselves from history. And the best parallel we could bring up was during the Mongol invasions of the Muslim world, and that this was during the period of the Abbasids. And when the Mongols sacked Baghdad, they were on their way west, and they were marching without any resistance. And so there were a group of Muslims called the Mamluks, who were slave soldiers, who realized, like, okay, we are the only barrier between the Mongols and the rest of the Muslims in North Africa. And if we don't stop them, North Africa is gone. Anatolia is gone. There's going to be no other group. So what they did was they had to and remember, this is a time in the Muslim world where the Abbasids had reached their climax. They're huge, but they were really fractured internally because what happens with decadence? With decadence comes all kinds of different frivolous things you start worrying about: tribalism, nationalism, things like this started spiraling out of control during the Abbasid Empire. And so the disunity was kind of the hallmark of the downfall that was supposed to come. And the Mamluk said, "Okay, we have to get it, band everyone together, and we have to bring people to realize this important threat that is threatening our existence. That we're facing eradication." Um, so them being native to those regions originally, they were slave soldiers who were brought in from the same regions of the steppe area from Mongolia or near Mongolia. Um, they knew how to fight with the Mongols, and so them along with many other groups that had fractured off of the Abbasids bandied together, and they formed a huge coalition, and they fought and gave the first defeat to the Mongols in the Battle of Ain Jalut. It was near modern day Syria, and so that was a monumental moment in Muslim history. And so, making a parallel off of that moment of history, if we can use that snapshot from history and see how we can make a parallel to, at least that from previous history where Muslims were the weakest, and now where we are incredibly weak and divided and being genocided at anyone's will without any kind of consequence that's available, or be, anyone who's killing us pretty much has free reign to do so. We've seen that no court or ICC ruling can stop that. So we have to figure out how we can join forces with all the various Muslims out there, whichever faction you are, unite on our principles of Islam. Um, uh, but- and that doesn't mean that you forego or you're ignoring, being the core tenets of Islam, because some people try to sabotage that logic and say, well, you want to unite with people who believe there's a prophet after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about our petty differences that we have related to nationalism and ethnic strife that we cause, these internal divisions among the main body of Muslims. We cause a lot of problems for ourselves where we don't want to work with each other because we have a few differences, a few minor issues that separate us from another. And so at least when it comes to Gaza, it's kind of forced us all to reconsider how we think about these things. Where do we go from? How did we arrive to where we are? What were the things that caused Muslims to crumble into all these splinter different states all across the Muslim world who are all looking out for each other? So there's a lot of psychological issues that are happening as well, where there's a very capitalistic mindset where people look out for each other first. It's very well entrenched among the Muslim states out there. I'll worry about myself first, and once I'm satisfied with you, I'll see if I can help you out. Okay, that's one mentality, that a capitalistic mentality. It's not that we're against every single thing about capitalism or that we're against the free market or anything. We're talking about the mindset, how people look out for themselves and then they look out for others. One of the examples is from Adam Smith's own book, The Wealth of Nations. He talks about how people will, a factory owner will take care of his employees by offering them good pay and good wages and healthcare and all that stuff, because that will make the employees work harder. They will want to stay employed. Now, on the surface level, it would be like, oh yeah, well, logically that makes sense. But people are missing the moral aspect of it. He's not talking about that it's the right thing to do. that you take care of your employees and make sure that they're well fed and they have proper health care because it's the right thing. No, because it's your own selfish interest to do so. Because a healthy worker will work harder for you. You see the difference? It's a very sneaky difference, but it plays really deeply into our psychology. And that's how, and these are things that are incredibly dangerous at how capitalism kind of sneaks up into our psyche and people just ignore it. They're completely oblivious to how it's count antithetical to our beliefs. It completely goes against it. We are moral human beings. Our morality is derived from our faith, from our religion, and you're using logic. You're studying how to what's that book? How to build friends and get influential people.
Oh,
That
How to
one.
Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie.
Yeah. Why are you doing that? Well, throughout the book, he's saying, "Be good because you will
There's
get
something in
friends."
it for you.
There's something in it for you. It's not about being a good person for the sake of morality. It's all about manipulation and how to extract whatever you can from people based on what they can provide to you. And it's so funny because it's like when I was first starting out the show, 2016, 2017, people were talking about that book. It was really um, the talk of the town on many different podcast platforms like Tim Ferriss and stuff. And it was like a must read book. And I was one of the people who just blindly read it. And then as time gone on, I thought about it. I'm like, this book is a bunch of horse bleep. And I was just like, this is not why you should be a good person, you know, because so you can influence people, you know, and so now I don't recommend any of these kind of books, these self-help books, unless I carefully review them. One of my dear friends is Sheikh Ismail Kamdar, who makes very good self-help books. I usually refer them to him because he's deriving his inspiration from Islam, and it's coming from a Muslim scholar. So just tangentially, getting back uh, getting off of that tangent and getting back to the main topic, we have to figure out how the Muslim world kind of broke up into these different factions. And so, uh, because Gaza has forced us to look in that direction, we've identified things like nationalism. Muslims, young Muslims, are looking back at their history and they're learning that we weren't always like this. We were, for the most part, during the Ottoman Empire, uh, we were a united body. And yes, there were problems and stuff like that. And no one was perfect. Um, but for the most part, security was guaranteed, and um, you were able to function as a Muslim without fear of repercussion wherever you went. You could go to any part of Europe without fear of persecution because you came from a world power, and they were forced to do business with you because you were a united body. And so these are things that I think we need to start reflecting on and focusing on how we got to where we were, and then figure out, well, how do we rectify that?
Yeah, no,
Is
you
that
made some really valid points. And actually, I wanted to bring up another example, kind of piggybacking off of what you said, especially since we both come from South Asian ancestry. A lot of people, when they talk about Indian colonization, like during the British Raj, they'll say, oh, you know what? Actually, I think colonization was great. They gave us railroads and they gave us language and, all these things. And it kind of actually goes back to exactly what you're talking about. The entire railroad system in India, at that time wasn't created as an advantage to, the Indian population. It was
yeah,
actually to transport the goods that, the British Empire was essentially using to subjugate the population. Right.
yeah,
So even though, yes, like railroads and the train system is very integral to India right now, it is something that was quote unquote due to British influence. But I wouldn't say the British gave it to them as a gift. Like, hey, thank you so much for letting us use your land and, abuse and oppress you guys. Here's our gift. It was more like, how do we utilize this land and make it easier and faster for us to colonize, subjugate, enslave, and take advantage of this country and its resources? And so the railroad system was a byproduct of it, but it wasn't something that was, given as a gift or, anything like that. And it comes back to what you're talking about, the incentives and the mindset. When people do certain things, are they doing it out of the goodness of their heart? Are they doing it because their mindset is, dog eat dog world? If I give a little bit, I'll get a lot back, right? They kind of view it as an investment. If I do X, Y, or Z, I'm, guaranteed to get this much money back or power or earn the trust of this person. And, it's easier to oppress them. And if we take it back to Muslim ideology, just in very, simple terms, I think it's attachment to dunya, right? As opposed to really focusing on deen. And I think a lot of Muslims are honestly, very easily swayed by dunya. They kind of look at the short term and the incentives that they can get in this life, right? In our lifetime, not thinking about the fact that as Muslims, we should be thinking about the afterlife. Even like when it comes to being a Muslim, they say if you do a good deed, don't sit there and brag about it, put it on social media, videotape it, talk about it at every, get together. You do it, you know what I mean? And then you keep quiet about it because, hey, that's a good deed that you did for God, right? For the sake of your religion. That's integrally part of who we are as Muslims. But I think a lot of Muslims have kind of forgotten their path. And, this actually kind of brings me to the next topic. And, everyone's discussing it. It's very relevant, especially to the Muslim world right now. What are your thoughts on political parties in the West, especially in the United States, as well as the, establishment? Because I had a lot of Muslim friends, especially before October, 7th, that were like, oh, I'm a Democrat and they stand up for minorities and X, Y, and Z. And then I had a multitude of, friends who were like, hey, I'm pro Trump, and, they're ultra MAGA because they're like, hey, like Obama, he bombed all these Muslim countries and Democrats are X, Y, and Z. And they align themselves not with the Ummah or like, the Muslim, their Muslim brothers and sisters. They align themselves with the political party, which isn't, neither party is really serving us at the end of the day. But I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this dilemma and what the Muslim world is waking up to.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can be reminded of the Prophet's hadith about how the Muslims will follow the West into, even if it was into a lizard hole, we would follow the Romans. I'm just paraphrasing here. I don't know the exact wording of the hadith, but the idea is that at least when we look at how, or just as I was speaking about in our previous point about how we arrived to where we are, if we've done any careful thinking, we would have hopefully learned that it was a terrible idea to align with any party, because we know how much either party has done for this act of genocide in Gaza. So we know how they think now. We know that they have no interest in something that doesn't benefit them. They're not operating from a moral standpoint. We as Muslims are people who have morals. We have a tradition that is backing us. They're operating from whichever issue that they want. It's a whole lot of, I don't want to pigeonhole one specific thing, but it changes from one day to another. It's constantly evolving. Their morality is changing. It's changing based on what is in their interest, right? Because going back to that capitalist mindset. Yeah, they're making negotiations with a pragmatic mindset about how they want to approach any kind of thing in the world. And they look at, I'm not saying morality has nothing to do with it. No, they're human beings. They have morals as well, but it's not their focal point. That's not where they're operating from. They're operating from many different standpoints of self-interest and what how much power they want to exert on the world and their um, standpoint and respect and prestige in the world. They have many different things that are all based on human ideas or human um, principles of power, money, and stuff like that. That they're kind of negotiating with constantly, and so you see them kind of being a uniparty of sorts. There, you see that there's very actually beyond the gender debate and stuff like that that's transpired over the past few years. Beyond that, they're very much the same thing. That's why you see so many people kind of like being independent now, and they're saying that I'm not sure what these parties even mean. They're not representing me. I see some good things about them. This is among the average American. We're not even talking about Muslims. We're just talking about average Americans have more and more kind of drifted towards the middle. Like I see some good things about them that they're talking about, and some good things about them. And so this is where we as Muslims kind of come in and say, like, hey, we have an alternative for all you guys in the middle who are disillusioned with these two parties. We have a way of life that our prophet taught us, and how to conduct ourselves, and how to conduct world affairs, and how to um, be vanguards of truth, justice, and liberty, not these snakes in the White House and Congress who are just using your emotions and um, uh, your sentiments against you. For they're just simply just using it to get power, and then they forget about you. And so, uh, at least I think that's one starting point to kind of think about as Muslims in the West, right? We realize, like, okay, not only are we um, alienating people by siding with a certain specific party, we're alienating ourselves. We're causing division among Muslims who might not want to be associated with you because you're a Republican or a Democrat or what have you. So it's an incredibly dangerous um, reason. And also, like, imagine if Muslims were the primary reason for Donald Trump to get elected. Imagine um, the next administration and how the the liberals would feel about that. Um, I don't think it would fare well for them fighting for our rights if we were the primary reason for Donald Trump. I mean, wouldn't you agree that we would be somewhat of a scapegoat if we were a party of blue or party of red for? So I think that's a dangerous path to be on as Muslims. We can't. We are sent. We are living in the West as ambassadors. Most of the ulama are pretty much agreed on. You have to, if you are living in non-Muslims lands, your only reason for living here is to do dawah. You cannot be just lapping it up in the luxury of the West and just enjoying it. That's not a valid excuse to live in the West. If you don't want to do dawah, if you don't want to be involved in the spread of Islam, go back home. There's many Muslim countries out where you can have just as good of a life now. But that's all. It all depends on how much people have an attachment to their religion and actually seriously consider those options. But um, we we have to think about, we have to be agents of Islam, not agents of any other political party, movement, ideologies, and many different types of people, influencers, and Twitter celebrities who have different types of ideas and stuff. It's all like as you dig through their ideas and as you find out what they're about, you just find out like, okay, well, so and so seems like they're very decent and are fighting for justice, and then you find out that they're incredibly racist, or it's
They're getting
happening.
a tax break for their philanthropy.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's very overt. Sometimes it's not. It's very eye opening if you're on Twitter at all and you see people fighting for Gaza, and you're like, oh well, I really like this person, and then you find out like, oh well, it's not really because they. I mean, yeah, they're talking about justice and stuff like that, but they have incredibly evil views on Jews and themselves, and we're like, "But that's not what we're about. We don't hate Jews. I don't want to be part of that movement, you know. We don't hate anyone. We would never, in a million years, do what the Israelis have done to us. So, and we don't ascribe all of what Zionism is to Judaism. So we don't have a problem with Jews, and Jews have lived with Muslims for thousands of years and lived peacefully and side by side in many of our communities until Israel came and started causing a lot of problems. But um, we have to figure out who it is among our community in the West that we want to prop up. We feel like they are a good representation of our faith, belief, values, and someone has to take charge. There has to be some influential Muslim who has to say, "Hey, I'm going to lead. I'm going to take charge. I'm going to." It doesn't have. They don't have to say like they represent all Muslims, but maybe we as Muslims kind of push them in that direction. You know, I don't think that is becoming of someone who says that I'm going to lead you, but they go in that direction and say, you know, they take charge in the conversation. They go in some of these difficult spaces and learn how to navigate some of the difficult conversations that are around Muslims and stuff. And we can derive stuff too. In the past few years, we've all made mistakes in how we've dealt with each other, how we've dealt with non-Muslims. People have made videos about our mistakes and stuff, and we realized like, okay, well, you know what, Hmm, that probably wasn't a good idea, but here's how I'll handle it in the future, and then you move forward with that. And so once we figure out how we're going to engage with the West, we follow the direction of someone who is representing whether it's a group of body of ulama or one individual scholar. It doesn't matter, but we have to take direction from um, where they're taking us, you know. And it cannot be with someone who's affiliated with a political party. It has to be our own path where we ascribe or we dictate the conversation. We tell them that you have problems with um, female reproductive rights and how that should be handled. Well, this is what our faith says. We're not completely like them. Neither are we completely with them on the left. So we're somewhere in the middle, and we have a very nuanced conversation about that. And so that I think is a much better. You'll feel because people are at the end of the day, they're still reason. They're still using reason to come to their conclusions about things. Few people are very rigid in their stupidity. Most people are reasonable people if you explain to them things the right way. And I really feel like I think if we have if we're able to take direction, I think we can change the way the conversation is moving. I'm still um really sad though that it's going to take so much effort to change the conversation. um yes, in many ways, Israel has lost. They've lost much of the public support and stuff, but at the cost of how many more lives? You know, at what point will the conversation turn? How many more thousands of people need to die? How many much more Muslim lands will be taken away um, by the Zionist entity as it expands into Syria and different areas and creates their Greater Israel project? So these are some scary times ahead, and I think we really need to sit down and focus and figure out how we can approach the coming years ahead.
No, you've made, incredible points. And I think one thing that you said that really stuck out to me was when you were kind of talking about how, we're Muslims first. I think that's the most important thing because what I've noticed is a lot of Muslims will say, I'm very left wing, I'm right wing, I'm moderate, I'm an independent, I like this ideology. And if that's how people identify themselves, that's fine, that's on them, right? But I think at the end of the day, a lot of people will, say, hey, I align myself with I don't know, being a Democrat, being a Republican, being like a Marxist, no one's going to say I identify as being a fascist, but we've seen that a lot even within our communities. But what they'll do is they'll look at the Western ideology, which is man-made, it's flawed, it doesn't serve the Ummah or the Muslim world. It was created to uphold Western civilization and systems. And then they'll look at the Quran and be like, hey, this is why this ideology is correct. And that's, in my opinion, the wrong way to go about it. I think we need to reverse that. We need to first and foremost study our history, study, our religion, understand, the ins and outs of it, and then look at the Western world and, literally cherry pick and choose the aspects of Western civilization that align with Islam accordingly. And it's not completely, left-wing ideology. It's not completely right-wing. I wouldn't even say it's smack dab in the middle. It's more like Islam is its own entity. It's perfect. It's pure. As Muslims, that should be our guiding force. And then if there's anything in the Western civilizations that align with that, that's perfectly okay. But to reverse that, I think defeats the purpose of religion, because we have to understand that if, like Islam, was given to us by God, and it's perfect. It's, through all the times. It's not something that can be changed or anything of that nature. And so it's a perfect system. It's a perfect way of life. It has everything in it, like legalities and economics and hygiene and, gender roles, and, the list goes on. And then you have these like Western, systems and ideologies that were created by man. They're heavily flawed. They're imperfect. They serve interests that are independent of, our religion and way of life. And so when we align ourselves, I think, too heavily with the West, I think we forget like our duty and obligations as Muslims. And I think one of the biggest obligations we have as Muslims is to, function as a united ummah. Because, at the end of the day, if there's someone suffering in Kashmir, if we have Black Muslims suffering in the United States, if we have people dying in Gaza, we shouldn't look at it as like separate entities, like, oh, well, that doesn't concern me. I'm, a different race or whatever the case may be. We have to look at it as there's the one arm of the ummah is suffering. And so until that there's a solution that's fixed, those people can eat, they're no longer oppressed, like I am suffering too. We have to view it as like my arm, right? I can't function with one of my arms right now because my brothers and sisters are suffering. If we think along those lines, right, and it comes with consequences. It's not easy to think like that. But to think like that, I think, is the only way forward. And, not to say that podcasting is the only, guiding force in the Muslim world. It's a teeny tiny fraction of it. But I think even like us both having podcasts, we have a lot of influence in the things that we say and do. So I think when people come to me and they say, oh, do you align yourself with, left-wing Muslims or right-wing Muslims, or what are your views on X, Y, and Z? I'm like, look, at the end of the day, there's certain things with other, Muslim organizations or communities, podcasts, whatever the case may be, where I may agree or disagree. But at the end of the day, especially as a Muslim woman, I think I am in the minority in the podcasting world. As a Muslim woman, one thing that I've been taught is to have adab. So one of the ways that, women in Islam have spread the religion is through their manners and their etiquette and the way that they carry themselves and handle certain conversations. And so for me, I don't like getting angry or vulgar or fighting with people or throwing them under the bus or like, hey, if I do X, Y, and Z, this is what's going to get views. I think the way that I like to approach it, especially as a Muslim woman, is, if we disagree on certain things, that is okay, right? It's naturally going to happen. But as long as we are both putting Islam first and foremost and viewing the world and, finding solutions through that lens, then we can move forward. And if people don't understand that, I need to, explain it to them and educate them and help them understand that.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things, at least when I'm talking to people and trying to give them a blueprint, I tell them it's right there in our religion. It's right there in the life of the Prophet. All the things, many of the things that we're experiencing or seeing in the world right now, the prophets lived through. They lived through torture, killing, um, They faced boycott by the Quraysh when they were first starting up. These aren't things that are alien to us. The Prophet had a very difficult life for a reason. It was made intentionally difficult so that we as Muslims know how to handle all these difficulties, so that we derive examples. Can you imagine that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the Prophet and the early Muslims additional problems so that we derive lessons from it? It's mind-blowing that they were given every kind of obstacle that can possibly arrive in their direction, and learn how to handle that. And so that we understand not only that how to handle those issues, but the importance of sticking to your principles, because they didn't sacrifice an inch. The Prophet was offered by numerous tribes of Arabia power, because when the Quraysh were persecuting him, they're like, oh man, this is a guy who can really lead us. He's from a noble family, and he is aspiring to bring greatness to our tribe with his leadership. But one of the tribes said they said we would accept everything. We don't want you to accept. We don't fight Persia. That was their only condition. Mind blowing. And the Prophet rejected that. They put one condition. It wasn't even that. Oh, the other tribes were saying you worship our God 1 year, we worship your God 1 year, or you don't even have to worship our God. You just stay silent. Let us worship our God for 1 year, and then we'll worship your God for 1 year. On other conditions, he said, "Oh, we'll give you all of the most beautiful women. We'll give you the best physicians if you want that. Just let this matter go. Well, you can be our leader." The Quraysh offered him leadership. They said, "You can be our leader. Just drop this whole subject about having one God." So imagine that level of sacrifice, that he went through every hurdle to stick to your principle,
No, that's
and to that in itself is so huge. We as Muslims, we have to realize, like, he went through all that for just for the sake of it, so that we derive lessons from it. It wasn't just just to make his story amazing. It's so that we realize, like, oh, there's going to be difficulty in sticking to your faith, in being grounded in tradition and not willing to budge. It's going to be hard. You're going to be tortured. You're going to face deportations. You're going to be facing the wrath of administrations in college campuses and stuff like that. People are going to be against you, but you have this rich tradition to hook into, to latch onto, and you derive inspiration from that. That in itself is so like man, it just gives me shivers, like, thinking about it, because it's like, wow, all of this stuff was there for a reason, because many generations later, thousands of years later, there would be Muslims like us who would look at his life and say, oh, he lived through this. The first martyr of Islam was a woman. She had a spear thrown into her by Abu Jahl, who was just incredibly arrogant. They were the power. He could not stand her, not willing to insult the Prophet. He wanted her. He was torturing her, and he wanted her to insult the Prophet, or to say something, or to leave the religion, and say something that would make her leave. And he stabbed her through her private parts with a spear, and that she holds that honor as the first martyr of Islam, and it signified their downfall. That such a man of that stature, he allowed his arrogance to get so high, because with power comes also arrogance, and we can make a parallel with that with Iblis as well. When Iblis was first rising among the angels and the people who worshipped Allah, he was really powerful. I mean, at least in terms of his stature, right, or his ranking. But he also got arrogant, and so this is what we're seeing now with a country like Israel, who's gotten incredibly arrogant, and they're causing wanton destruction, just killing people left and right all over the world. And anyone who even says something, they're getting them kicked out of the United States, because we all know who's behind all these deportations and all these things that are happening all over the across college campuses where people with student visas are being sent back to their countries. We know who's behind it, and so we have to look back to these examples where Abu Jahl, an incredibly arrogant man, is using every weapon at his disposal to hurt the Muslims. Muslims were boycotted for 3 years, and they were sent to a valley where many families faced mass starvation, and they lived on the sympathy of the Quraysh who their extended families who were among the Quraysh who sent them some food every now and then. But for 3 years, they faced incredible difficulty, and so we realized like, okay, where do these things have happened in our tradition? How do we go forward? We know that these are signs of victory. It's not just that how to go forward, but these are also signs of victory that when they're losing, this is what they do, and then our rise will be atmospheric. It'll be parabolic, because once oppression falls, everyone wants justice. Truth spreads all across the world, and I really genuinely feel that, and I feel that once the charade is up, the gig is up of capitalism and modernity, and people will see it fall in front of their face and figure out that it brings no joy to anyone, and there is only one alternative left: the rule of justice and mercy by Islam. So
Yeah, no, I think that was a beautiful and super like profound answer. And I think, the message is very clear. I think that we've been given the blueprint, alhamdulillah, and we're very, very fortunate for that. And to ignore that, the examples, the stories, the commands, if you will, to ignore all of that and to fall prey to Western propaganda, it means we failed the test as Muslims, right? Like we see a
yeah,
lot of Muslims who practice the dogma, and the five pillars, and their entire branding is, hey, I'm a Muslim, and, this is what we stand for, and this is what they do, or we do, excuse me. But those are just words at the end of the day. And sometimes when they're practicing those pillars, sometimes I almost wonder or feel like, is that just a formality at the end of the day? Because when we look at a lot of Muslims like actions, it's not in line with our religion, right? We have
yeah.
to be kind, we have to be ethical, we have to put others before ourselves. We can't be attached to dunya. We have to realize that a lot of these Western constructs are not built for us to be ethical and do the right thing. It actually incentivizes people to be selfish and to be cruel and to be unkind. And so, we really have to put religion at the forefront of what we do. And, we also have to unite as an ummah. And, for anyone just tuning in, or anyone that tuned in late, you are watching the Muslim Street. We have, the OG of Muslim podcasts. We have Imran Muneer from the Mad Mamluks. We've just been talking about our path forward as Muslims, kind of discussing religion, politics, where we stand as Muslims in the West. It's been an amazing, conversation so far. We'd really appreciate if you, followed us, like.
You broke up. Can you hear me?
Yeah, she seems to have frozen, but it might still be going
No,
on
I'm
her
looking at
YouTube actually.
the YouTube channel. She's frozen,
Yeah.
so
Okay,
hopefully we can get her back.
she's still there, but her video dropped off. So
Yeah, so
let's
her
give it a
internet might
second. Yeah, and I'll put you on center screen if there's anything you want to say in the meantime until she comes back. Let me check this out from a different screen. Okay, Imran, if you can continue some dialogue in the
Yeah,
vein of what you were saying
yeah.
in the
I mean,
meantime.
yeah. So we as Muslims have to first look at some of the extreme sacrifices that the early Muslims have made. Right. We first think about Bilal radiallahu anhu. Bilal radiallahu anhu was um, a enslaved black man who was the first Muslim, one of the first Muslims who accepted Islam, and they tortured him because they could, because nobody would stand up for him because he's a slave, and so we can learn from that he was one of he kept on repeating ahad ahad. He was trying to teach people that at least we can at least derive from that example that while him being a slave, he still said ahad, knowing that the prophet would have said, hey, if you were facing torture, you can say whatever you want just to escape the torture, and when your life is in danger, there's a permission to say what you want, to get out of that pain, to get out of that persecution. Allah will forgive you. But he kept on saying it, and you have to understand, what is that? Why is that so important for them not to succumb? Why is it so important, not just Bilal, but in modern day? We just heard about the fall of Bashar al-Assad's prisons. There were thousands of prisoners who didn't succumb to the incredible torture and persecution that they experienced in those prisons. They were given similar types of demands and stuff. You usually get a letter where you apologize, and you're supposed to condemn what you previously believed. And many prisoners in those prisons did not succumb to that. Anyway, welcome back, Hina. Can you hear?
Yeah, sorry about that. It just kicked me out of the streaming platform. My apologies. But no, this has been such a phenomenal conversation. I only don't want to say it's my favorite because I've had so many amazing conversations on the Muslim street. But that being prefaced, I think, being in the podcasting world, especially as, Muslims, I think we have a certain responsibility. And despite what we see going on in the Muslim pop culture scene, if that's the way to put it, or the podcasting
Yeah.
scene, or, Muslims in journalism and media, there's a multitude that are super inspirational and kind, and, are spreading the right message and influencing people in a very positive way. But you'll also come across a multitude of people who, are doing things as like clickbait, for shares, for likes, for clout, if you will. And we can't let that deter us as individuals from what we're doing. Cause I think, having these platforms, it's alhamdulillah, like it's such an amazing gift that's been given to us. And we have to utilize it not to benefit ourselves, right? Because I think that's viewing it from a dunya mindset, from a capitalistic mindset. We have to view it as, how can I utilize this platform to help Muslims, to better them, to better ourselves, and the information that we're learning as we're platforming different people, bringing on various different guests. So I think
Yeah.
the seerah of the prophet, the Quran, Sunnah, these hadiths, listening to Muslim scholars that are well qualified and have good intentions, to be regular in our prayer, to practice the pillars, and ultimately to be a kind, ethical human being. That's something that we need to uphold, because at the end of the day, clearly you have way more subscribers than us. Inshallah, we'll get there
It's
soon.
never about
But
subscribers,
regardless of,
if it
yeah,
was a
regardless of
game of
how many
subscribers.
people,
Yeah.
yeah, regardless of how many people are watching or listening, even if there's one individual who listens and says, you know what, I want to be a better Muslim. I need to have better morals and values. I really need to study my religion. I need to understand that, being part of this ummah comes with certain responsibility. It's not all about myself, is probably, the most important thing. But that being said, I'm super humbled that you were on, Imran. This has been such an amazing conversation. Everyone, if you can please, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please follow us on Twitter or X. It's The Muslim Street. We also have a website called themuslimstreet.com. You can submit articles if you're a writer, journalist. It's a media project where we welcome all sorts of people. And Imran, if you wanted to kind of let us know where people can find you, reach out to you, as well as about your podcast, we'd really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I do that, I just wanted to talk about something you just mentioned. When you see a lot of people who are doing stuff for clout, and even you'll see Muslim influencers, people in Dawa doing stuff, playing the algorithm game and stuff like that. And everyone's made some sort of negotiation, some type of bargaining that they've done within their head and how they're going to exploit that algorithm. Certainly, I'm not completely innocent either of that game either. But I will say, when you make your self, when you realize that it's the mission that takes the priority, when you humble yourself and your ego and your being, when it takes a back seat to Islam and the mission of the Muslim, expanding and giving liberation to the heart, mind, body, and soul, that would make everything easy. All these different problems related to how you're gaming the algorithm will all dissipate, because it won't ever be about subscribers. It won't ever be about your income and how much you're able to get people to click on your content. Once you figure that out, once you sort that out, it'll never be an issue again. And I think it's a challenge. It'll always challenge you, especially when you see other people gaming the algorithm and stuff like that, and playing the numbers. And you're going to want to. It's very easy to fall into that trap. But if you have your intention sorted out, I think you'll be fine. As far as getting in touch with the Mad Mamluks, you can subscribe to the Mad Mamluks on YouTube. We are youtube.com/the Mad Mamluks, TheMadMamluks. And I'm sure Sina will have some link in the description to help you out with the name.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. It was very humbling to have you on. Inshallah, we can have you again, very, very soon. And want to just thank all our subscribers. Please, watch us next week. We have very exciting episode planned for everyone. Good night.
Thank you so much for having me. Assalamu alaikum.